Hey internet, it's me, your friendly DM from Tales of Zero. Welcome to our weekly DM chats here on Roll for Trouble. Today we're just kind of gonna take it easy and maybe do just a few questions that maybe take us down memory lane a little bit, and a few advice points as well. We found a thing on the internet for hashtag RPG a day in 2018. And it had some questions that I thought were really good. Some of them in particular, the one that I really like, the two that I really like are: how can players make the world seem real? And how can a GM make the stakes important? So we'll jump right on into it. So how can players make the world seem real? There are a lot of different ways I think that players can make the world theirs. You definitely have to, you have to be willing to invest a lot of time into your character, because a lot of the things that make the world seem real to a player are your backstory. What connections do you have to the world? Is it the guild that you're in? Is it your family? Is it your friends? Is it, the pet bear that you found in the woods and rescued? All of those things are very important to help tie you into the game. But not only that, your contributions within the game, as far as, when you're walking into town and the DM says something, you go, hey, I know that information. And the DM then goes, oh, okay, roll a history check or roll a nature check or something like that to determine the amount of knowledge that you actually know. Especially if you say, well, I'm a ranger, I should totally be able to find my way through this swamp, things like that. So it's you as a player investing time and actually caring about your character and coming up with ways that the DM can hook you into the story by using, the NPCs that you create in the extensions of your character and backstory. So that's something that I think that a lot of players don't utilize enough, especially if you're just playing like a murder hobo session where you just go in and kill everything, which is fine, but if you're really looking for a story element and want to actually have your character feel connected to the world, you have to give your DM a place to start, and a lot of that comes from your backstory. And I'm not asking, the DM shouldn't be asking you to write like a 13-page essay on your character. If that's your jam, go for it. The DM might want like a too long didn't read summary at the end, but if you have that backstory for yourself to kind of play with, then that's the important part. And just be willing to, I think, as you're going along through the game, be invested and ask questions of your DM and, try to visualize what it is, and also be willing to offer up things that you think would be there. If your character is one that's had a lot of wanderlust and has traveled the world in its, in the past before you met up with your current partying group, did you come through this town previously? Are there, you're like, well, there's this tavern down the street that I know of. Well, the DM has to take that into account. So you've already done, half the DM's job by coming up with a name for this tavern. And at that point, you can run with anything. You can be like, yeah, this tavern is a shithole, but it's got some of the best beer you'll ever find. Great. The DM doesn't have to think about it. And you've just created something in the story that is tied to not only you, but the DM can then use time and time again. And they can flesh that out in other ways and put things that you didn't anticipate when you first came up with that item. So it becomes a true collaboration as far as between you and the DM, which I think is probably one of the coolest things to do as a player and a DM, is have those moments where you two to come together and create something within the game that then becomes a monument of, your creativity together. So, just be willing and look for those opportunities, and the DM should be more than willing to let you take the reins in those situations, especially if you're just coming up with like places or people. Because in all honesty, it's a lot of work to come up with all of those people and places, and the less I have to do, the better. So, just kind of keep that in mind. Another question, the second one that I really liked, was how can the GM make the stakes important? So, for GMs, game masters, DMs, when you're thinking about your game, you know, you definitely I know I do at least, I tend to think of in terms of good versus evil, you know, and I anticipate all of my characters or all my players to be good people. So the fact that I put this injustice in front of them, my thought, and I know how I think of as a player, is like, I have to go fix this. This is my job. This is why I'm here. But, you know, in true story, in true players, that's not always what players do. Sometimes they're like, meh, do, to the next plot. And you're like, but. So, raising the stakes, I think, means making it personal. Make it something that the players want to investigate. Which was so odd in the last game of Cyril. If you haven't watched it, I'm about to spoil something for you. But if you haven't, go watch it. Just pause and come back. But if you have, one of the funniest things after game was that for the Bard, a lot of his motivation comes from wanting to wander the world and kind of pick up music. That's his thing. What was so funny was that he wasn't really vested in the story so much in the last game until he went into this tavern and they were like, no, you can't play here. And he was like, what? So offended. And then right then and there was like when he got invested in the story and was like, well, I have to find out why they won't let me play because this doesn't make any sense. I bring in money for them. I don't understand. So that was interesting to me in what, you know, after I had a conversation with him out of game, you know, and he was like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I didn't understand. And I was like, that's funny that the reason why you're now vested is because I didn't allow you to play. And it wasn't even that I made the decision, like, it wasn't even, like, supposed to be plot-driven or anything like that. Like, it was just that it didn't go along with the things that I had planned. And I was like, no, they wouldn't want him to play here. So, there we go. Knowing what I know about my characters and my storyline. And so that was just interesting to me that it made it personal for him and his character. So moving forward, I'm excited to try and find more opportunities like that as a GM for my players. You know, I found a little way to sneak in something for Brigitte's character, which was funny to watch the players' reaction. That was funny as hell. I'd been planning that for a really long time. It just seemed like the perfect opportunity. So, but yeah, finding those little moments and just kind of having them. And I actually already kind of have general like plot devices and things like that already planned out for a majority of my players. So it's just finding little times and moments that are appropriate to sprinkle those in. Salt Bay. So, yeah. So that's really what it comes down to is taking those characters' backstories they provide to you and think about it and really just find those moments and opportunities that pull them in, you know, pull out the characters and what drives them. And that's what makes great stories, you know. Even going back to when I played my first D&D campaign, as much as my character, you know, he and his mother were estranged, but the fact that his mother, even though they were estranged, he had a great love for his mother and he wanted to save her. So when her temple and she became under attack by the villain of the story, my character was right there doing his best to try and defend her, even though all of his life she had done nothing but put him down and you know, verbally abuse him in some ways. He was right there to defend her because that was who he was. So there are definitely opportunities as a GM for you to really play with the players and make it so that they, you know, they feel drawn in. And I think also something that as GMs we have to remember is sometimes we do have to pull the kitty gloves off and we can't play nice. We have to make the stakes believable. I mean, there's no one wants to have a TPK, at least not the way I play. But I think that you really have to provide a true threat when you as far as you talk about like raising the stakes, like when you come into combat or you go into battle or you just are creating someone who is creating a villain, you want to make sure that there are true consequences if the players fail to achieve something to stop or counteract the thing that you're doing. It doesn't involve, if they don't follow the plot hook that you drop in relation to this one city and this one gang, well, they come back 3 months later and the town is overrun by this gang who has taken majority of people hostage, has robbed a vast majority of people, has slaughtered, the ruling parties or anyone of wealth and things like that. Like, make it so that if they don't do something, there is a consequence to that action, just like in real world. And I think that when you do that and the players can come back and see that something has changed and something is different, they realize that their action and even inaction have consequences, and that makes the game real for them as well and makes them consider their choices and their actions. It gives a weight to what they do. And that's, I think, what makes a great game is, if I do this, what could happen? If I don't do this, what could happen? And that's something that I think most people who come into D&D truly enjoy, is that consequence and, the action versus inaction and what are the consequences thereof. So just some things to keep in mind as you're planning your game and trying to draw your characters and your players in. And then let's see, what else do we have? Let's see. Something that I think that a lot of people don't realize when playing D&D is how the game changes you. I think that maybe not just D&D, but tabletop in general. Outside of the game, you definitely develop deeper friendships, I think, with the people you game with, because let's be real, some of the things that your DMs put you through are pretty traumatic if you think about it. And you and your fellow players have gone through hell and back. And you form a tight bond, and you have stories and memories. Even if they're imaginary, you have those things to fall back on, and they truly define you and your friendship. And, you always have something to laugh and look back on. I mean, one of the things that I remembered, so backstory time. This past weekend, my parents, they're getting ready to move from a house to a new house, clearly. And I had to go through my shit in the attic. So I had been thinking about this binder since the first small binder I had of all my D&D stuff from when I first started playing. And I was like, man, I know I still have that binder somewhere. Luckily enough, I do, and I did. And I was flipping through it, and in college particularly, I doodled a lot on my schoolwork. So I have drawings of my character and the other people and the other players that I was playing with, their characters and what I imagined them to look like. And one of the things I remembered as I was flipping through is there was a little doodle of a ring. And it triggered a memory, and I was like, that's right. So my character, Kyrus, he had been brutally beaten up and was within inches of his life, had failed multiple con saves and was this close to dying. And one of the other players sacrificed her family's knowledge, because she was, I think, the way she I think wrote her character with the DM was that her character was supposed to be a lost princess or heir to some sort of psionic throne or something like that. I didn't know a lot about it. And I only know a little bit out of as player because of what she was describing with the DM when this was all happening. And so she gave up the knowledge of her family, and what little knowledge she had in exchange for my character's life. And I just remember thinking when it triggered in my head that happened, I was like, holy shit. You know, that's something that you don't really think about, and I think it really defines that player's actual character, their real life character, that they're willing to sacrifice a lot to save the people they love. And, you know, those kinds of revelations about the people you play with are very powerful. And it's interesting, I think, that I've always believed that characters that we create are manifestations of little aspects of our own personality. So it's interesting to see how those personalities interact, and you really get to learn so much about your friends, and it's eye-opening. And I think that that's something that we don't think about as players. We're just here to have fun, but you know, it can change your relationships and make them truly deeper, and you get to see amazing sides of people that you never thought you'd see. So I think that's something that is really wonderful about RPGs and tabletops and gaming in general. So it was just something that I thought about, that I found kind of like, I don't know what the word is, but you know, yeah. So I feel like I've rambled for a while.
A little bit.
Are there like questions from the chat? Perchance, maybe, no, yes. Which is fine if there aren't.
No, we've mostly just been going, choo choo, all aboard the trauma train.
Let's see. What time is it?
8:16.
Oh wow, I feel like I talked for 30 minutes and it's only been 15. Wow. Okay, let's see.
Do the awkward dance. Do 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 do. That's all you get out of me for the awkward dance. Do the hustle. Okay, done.
On the I guess the train of just thinking about what RPGs and tabletop gaming can do, I think it's one of those experiences that I think a lot of people are like curious about but not sure how to get into it. So I think it comes if we and being in the community and being a part of the tabletop community and getting to see the amount of support and love that majority of us have for one another is really nice. And I think that we need more of that support for those who are new to the community, and being open and welcome to those people who are curious, and just being, you know,
don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick, but you know, be open and be welcoming, and be willing to explain and answer questions that people have, and share in stories and things that, you know, excited you as a player. Because I think that excitement is what catches other people's attention and makes them curious about the game. Because there are so many of us who play D&D, and we all live really strange, weird, very average Muggle lives. And then, you know, you go out on a limb and mention it to somebody, and you find in passing that they've played too. And it's like, yeah, you might not be a hardcore gamer, but that's okay. You know, but you find like a like soul, and it's really awe-inspiring when you finally open up. You find that there are more people like you who have similar interests, and that's really cool. So, you know, I think that that's something as we as people in general just need to take into consideration in our everyday lives, but to open up our communities as well of gaming and all that kind of stuff, and just, yeah, do that and welcome people who really want to play, and give them the chance to experience it too. Because in Tales of Cyril, two of our players, Amanda and Craig, they've never played D&D before. The closest they've come is through WoW or Neverwinter Nights, which so they have some basic knowledge of how things work as far as gaming is concerned, but D&D is its own monster in and of itself. And it's being patient is a big one, because it's, if you've played the games for years, you kind of know how generally the mechanics work. And it's really frustrating, I think, sometimes, especially for veterans, to just be like, this is how you do it, rather than just kind of give them the chance to kind of work through it on their own. And that's something we all struggle with, to be honest. I know I do. But they'll get better in time. And as they do, as they get more comfortable in their own skin and their play style develops, there's going to be more amazing moments and stories that'll be had for those characters, and we get to see, and we as people get to, meet and learn about amazing people who we've welcomed into our lives and our gaming community. So it's, just don't be a dick is really what it comes down to. But, I'm excited to help them and see where they go and learn about them and their characters and their creativity, and that's going to be really awesome. So,
we have a question.
What?
It says, how do you transition from MMORPG to IRL RPG?
I don't know that there really is a good transition from MMOs to IRL. Because MMOs, to me, I played WoW briefly for about a year. And to me, it was like some video games, it can get very grindy where it's just like, go do the thing. You read maybe some of the stuff, but it's about the action. It's never truly about the story unless the game is truly geared in a very thematic and story-based way, like with, I would say, Dragon Age, which is very story-based. However, there's still that element of click, 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 click. I don't care about all this text. Move along to the story, because I think a lot of us, with some of the newer games, is that we don't look at the text. It's based on what we hear and what we see, and that's how we draw our stories. I'm sure there are plenty of people who've actually read the codexes in Dragon Age and have like a shit ton of more depth of the stories than I ever will, but I just don't have the patience for it when I'm playing video games. Very rarely do I sit down and actually read in a video game, which is so weird. But I think the one thing you can probably bring from an MMO to a tabletop RPG is the understanding of like gear and maybe doing some number crunching, because a lot of at least with the group that I played, they were very heavily into like knowing what gear was really good for like what class, and like how those buffs and modifiers with their spells and their abilities, like, and really knew how to max shit out. But I was just there for the pretty graphics and the griffins. That was me. I'll be very honest. And the only reason I played was because my friends were playing, and I was like, okay, sure, I want to join. I want to be where the people are. So yeah. But yeah, if you're good at MMOs in relation to like I would say like the number crunching, you'll probably be pretty decent at D&D, because once you get the hang of the mechanics, you'll probably be like, oh, okay, so that's how that works, and that's how that works. And once you sit down and kind of play and fiddle with it, you'll probably do great at that aspect. If you're into like more thematic story games and like I keep bringing up Dragon Age, or like the BioWare games, or sometimes even like the Mass Effect games, that's also BioWare. Fallout, that's the word I was looking for. The games that kind of have you build a character, from the ground up and kind of really personalize them, it allows you, I think, when you're doing that, you kind of come up with different personalities for that character and kind of give them a little backstory of your own that is personal to that particular character. If you like those kinds of games, you'll love tabletop, because it's truly a very, character, it's a very, what's what I'm looking for?
character driven.
customization, or you're very able to customize your characters, which is if something that you like, you'll probably really love tabletop. But I find a hard time comparing MMOs to IRL tabletops aside from like the gear crunching and the number crunching, especially if you're into that kind of thing. So.
We have another question from chat.
What?
Favorite NPC in a game?
Favorite NPC in a game? Okay, I'm going to go for my game because it's the only NPCs I can truly think of right now because they're all in my head right now. It's probably the Red Dragon Brothers. It's so stupid how I came up with them. I think I was driving one day and I saw Red Bull gives you wings. And I was like, ha ha ha. Wait. Red Dragon. And like my brain just went off from there. Like I came up with this whole stupid slogan about how dragon potions give you wings or something stupid like that, and then like that evolved into the Red Dragon Brothers who make potions, or there was a Red Dragonborn who made potions, and then it blew up from that. And so I think even before I really started planning Cyril truly, I had like these 5 Dragonborn brothers like already in my head and planned out, at least as far as what they were going to do and like their general personalities. So they're I don't know why, but I love them. So they're right now those 5 are my favorite NPCs, even though I can't get their names straight. One day I will. So.
Chat says lol. Nah,
Lol.
never.
Yeah, I know. I always get stuck on 4, and then I'm like, what was the 5th name? No!
Maybe you should, like, write them down.
I do, but I just don't remember them off the top of my head without looking. They are literally, it's in a book. Not in a book, but it's in my binder. Vander, Vlad, Vinny, Victor, Vincent. Ha!
Vinny and Vincent are the same thing, though.
No.
Vinny is a nickname for Vincent.
Well, his name is Vinny, and he was named Vinny.
All right.
All right.
Suddenly the DM is gonna fight us. Don't read that. It's empty. Don't do that either. Yeah, thus far no other questions in chat.
Now you got me doubting myself.
Exactly. You're welcome. No.
Oh well. I'll deal with it.
We'll deal with it later when it comes up. I don't think we've actually met all 5 of them.
You have.
Oh, have we?
I
Yes.
have, at least. When we did the world's most complicated store transaction, pretty much every one of them was involved.
Yeah, the blacksmith, the bookkeep, the potion maker, and then the 2 face man. Vlad and Victor? No.
I thought Victor's the blacksmith.
I think Victor is the blacksmith. I know Vlad. Vlad was like the first one I created, so he was like my first. He was the first dragon brother. I don't remember the third. I don't remember his name. Like I said, I'm terrible at remembering their names. I know their positions. And it was probably a terrible idea to give them all V names.
Yep.
But here we are.
You know their positions: fullback, halfback, quarterback.
Not that kind of positions. I mean within their store. Shop. There we go. I was combining the 2 words.
Words are hard.
Into a word that already exists.
Oh, here we go. Another question. How do you keep a game engaging for players?
I feel like it goes back to how do you like raise the stakes. Keeping a player engaged is finding something that their character finds personal, and literally dangling a carrot over their nose and say, "Here's this thing. You have to go get it." And kind of like I did with Susie's character last game. Still my favorite reaction by far.
Fucking watching you.
But yeah, just finding those little things and catching their attention to make them ponder and think. Because even then, like when Susie wasn't actively in the game and Brigitte wasn't active, I could see her sit there fiddling with that little piece of paper I gave her and just like looking at it, thinking about it, just like, yes. And that doesn't have to happen all the time, but I think that, you know, because now I feel like, at least I hope so, that Susie is now curious and wanting to find out more about this mysterious woman that has appeared in the game and see if she can't find her again.
Brigitte's gonna literally walk into every single bookshop and anticipate running into her again.
Good thing we have no wizards.
What?
Good thing we have no wizards.
Good thing we definitely have no wizards.
Why?
Because wizards in bookstores, like me in a bookstore, you never get to leave.
Touche.
Run into every single bookstore. Have you seen an old lady? What?
They come in here all the time. Like,
she looks like this. Terrible drawing. Can't say that I've seen that one.
But yeah, it's about finding something that I think the players would find their characters to find personal and want to explore that something again and more. And even just making like the general theme of the story that you're telling, making that personal to them in some way is a great way to keep your players engaged. Because if they have personal stakes in the story, they're more wanting and willing to explore and dive into the story that you've set before them. So it's about creating a good story and finding ways to hook your players that make it personal. That's really what it boils down to, I think. So, and occasionally you can just fling, you know, random bits and pieces at people and see what happens. So, I have plans. I have so many plans.
I see you, Satan. Here we go. Here's another good one. How do you keep your players on task?
You don't. I mean, to an extent, I think that a good session, a truly good session, isn't about trying to be a taskmaster. You want it's a world. You know, you are just the provider of information and the setter of scenes. You don't really, you're not there, you know, you don't have a say in what actions are happening, which is a really hard thing for me because I think last game they were planning something and I was like, oh, but you could, I'm not here. Literally, I don't exist. I'm not a player. But it was really hard not to for me, because I also really function sometimes as a player. I'm always like, oh, but you could also do this. And it's like, why am I helping you guys? I'm really a terrible DM. No. But I think that a good story is what will keep your players on task. Even if they wander off and they go to explore other things, eventually they will find their way back to the main story. And I think it's your job as a DM to kind of go on the ride with them and just give them like signs that point to a certain direction. If they ignore it, fine, but be ready for that and just have a backup plan. You know, just a stupid, simple quest of, you know, rocks fall, but not like rocks, but like caw-caw rocks.
How'd that go again?
Caw-caw rocks. You know, just have something random happen that, you know, will engage them for that story. And once they feel like they've explored that avenue, they'll probably go back to the original signpost you pointed and go, oh, it's this way, you know. And that's, I think, what the amazing thing about D&D is that your players will never stay on task. And you just have to be prepared for that and just kind of roll with the punches. So, yeah. You don't. To answer your question very shortly, you don't keep your players on task. So, at least not in the way you're thinking, because that's considered railroading, and it's very done lightly, sparingly, like 1% of your game is like railroading, it's understandable in some situations, but all the time your players are going to know, and your players are going to feel like their actions don't matter and that they have no control in what they're doing and where they go and who they see and what they talk to. If they feel like, if you mention like this really beautiful house that they pass by, oh, it's just scenery, it doesn't mean anything. Because you've railroaded them so many times. That house could actually be one of like the biggest plot points in the world, but because you have time and time again proved that if they're not going on the main plot that you have laid out specifically for them, they'll never wander off and see anything awesome that you may have planned as a backup or just kind of like a little tidbit or trail. So that's my advice. So
Chat's kind of quiet with questions.
that's fine. Well, it's 8:30, so we've gone for about 30 minutes anyway. So I say we had a good session today. If you have any other questions for us, of course, we're always available and all ears on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeet.
I think that's all the social media sites we're on. You can find us at pretty much anything at Roll for Trouble. We're there. Submit questions away. And shout out to all of our Twitter followers. Some of you are amazing with your Roll for Trouble. Make it double. We see you.
We see you.
And we're amused. But yeah, like I said, if you guys have questions, post them to us. We'll be more than happy to answer. We have River of Turicel Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And then we have my game, Tales of Cyril, Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have a lot of dungeons to build, and I am not prepared. So yeah, feel free to catch up. Of course, we have all of our videos on YouTube. The most recent ones are on Twitch. We're working on that. We're trying to get up to 50 followers, so if you know any friends who want a good Friday night, 2-hour game to watch, let them know. Come join us. But otherwise, we'll see you on Friday, Internet. Au revoir.